My name is Kao Li Vang. I am part of the 1.5 generation. I moved to the US with my parents as a baby, so I kind of grew up with the older generation, but also because I was so young when I moved to the US, I kind of grew up more like a second generation. So my project is creating a toolkit for practical practices for family archives. No one's ever really worked on our family archive. We have a bunch of stuff, different documents and different like photos and things that they brought with them to the US. One of the things that I saw a lot of pictures of was my dad holding us as babies and like little kids. And a lot of pictures of him just wanting us to understand that the war happened and that he was a part of it and that we came to the US. As I've gotten older, I've realized that I'm losing aspects of my culture. There's just a part of me that wants to get reconnected to my roots. Additionally, with my father passing away, it made me realize that I didn't care or put the efforts into learning about where I came from. When I was looking through pictures to get ready and like decorate for the funeral, something I realized in the patterns of everything that I looked at and what he captured and kept, all the magnetic media that he kept track, all the photos, all of the just analog stuff that he kept was always about Danang and about like his service in the military, and it was always family. But there's no formality to it, there isn't a lot of context to it. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to go through it, start archiving it, and then use that as the template for how I would develop my project, and then create options for other people to do it for themselves, from different materials to just like actual like ways to preserve and store different resources, just to make it simpler, because sometimes it's hard to ask for help. Sometimes we get overwhelmed when we're relearning and not feeling Hmong enough, or not feeling like you understand the language or any aspects of the culture enough. And I feel like simplifying it and teaching that is something that I could do. I think just the act of going through your family items, there's a feeling that comes from it. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, but when you see the old pictures, when you see the random documents, like, it makes it more real. It makes the history, the people more real. When it feels more real, you want to understand more, and it starts shaping your identity. And that's what I hope my project creates for people. It just encourages you to explore more and to really like care. That's what I hope my project does for other people, is just caring more, because then you understand more.
My name is Linda Lohr, and I am a second generation Hmong American. So my project, when I was applying for the fellowship, initially I wanted to make like the Hmong version of IMDb. I just thought that it was valuable because, a lot of Hmong movies only exist in like VHS form or DVD, and nobody really uses that anymore. And so I wanted to put a place for them to exist online for everyone to access. This was really important to me because even before hearing about this fellowship program, I already knew that I wanted to pursue my project. I had just graduated college, majored in computer science, and I knew that I wanted to use my technical coding skills to do something for my community. And so as an avid Hmong movie watcher, it just kind of fell naturally to me that I wanted to make a website for Hmong movies. That was kind of like how my grandpa would spend time with us, I guess. If it wasn't like going outside and fishing, it was watching Hmong movies. And so some of my favorite would be like Nian Kao Shou Pa, Dropli, and yeah, just those two really, I watched them all the time. Once I started working on this project, it grew out of like the IMDb kind of scape, but more about like how to address our community's needs. Like, what does a website for Hmong people look like for the older Hmong generation, for people who want to watch a Hmong movie but don't know the title, for people who don't know how to write in Hmong, right? But one of the biggest things that I have been learning from the workshops and the support is just how to catalog and archive and preserve history better. As someone who does do coding and is more in the digital space, I feel like I take a lot of things for granted, like if I take photos, I can always look back at it on my camera roll, but that's not always the case for, artifacts. And so, yeah, I hope from this fellowship I become a lot more well-versed on how to preserve the history. As a second generation Hmong American, I feel like I can only imagine what the late 90s and early 2000s was like. Kind of through looking at the history of the movies and kind of the stories they tell, I've really been able to see like what kind of stories were important during the 90s, where were they living, and what kind of styles of clothes people were wearing, and also like how the Hmong language was like being used at the time. It's really important because these stories are like technically being erased, right? Going extinct because of the act of decluttering, basically. And as a result, I feel like a lot of people, especially younger generations, don't really have that many options of like Hmong media to consume. And as a result, we have less exposure to our language, less exposure to, the types of storytelling and types of stories that are valuable to our community. So that's kind of like what I aim to do with my project is, give more exposure to these movies and continue letting them live in a space that is accessible to everyone.
My name is Wan Vang, first generation Hmong immigrant. So my project started out as capturing the oral folklores from my elders, starting out with my mother, and then rewriting it into English and Hmong, and then eventually creating a play element for children. The goal of it is to be able to incorporate words that the current generation and younger generation don't know, or because they don't speak that language anymore, or as clearly as what we normally do. Adding all those elements and the element of storytelling, myths, and into something where they can interact with and play with. What drew me to this fellowship was I wanted to capture stories of when growing up and listening to my mother and my grandmother tell me different stories of folklore, folk tales, why things exist in the world. Growing up, I loved to tell stories and make up stories. And there was many fragments throughout, where I would forget the stories that I heard. When I saw what the proposal was, it was something where I wanted to go back and have the time to be able to capture these things. This fellowship definitely brought me closer to being who I am as a Hmong individual. It made me more proud of who I was and the art that exists around the culture, and the different formats, the different ways that you could tell a story. Even whether it's through bandao and story cloths, to be able to see the story of how the Hmong people came to the U.S., hearing our elders, our parents speak about our journey as stories over time come and go. Everyone, it's like playing the telephone game where you add in different elements. The story becomes different from generation to the next. If we don't capture the stories, we would probably eventually lose elements of it. I'm glad that with this project that I'm able to capture my mother's stories and the conversations that come out of it. And it was, just being able to like sit down with her, and actually when she forgets elements of the stories, because I've been doing a little bit of research, being able to help her fill in those gaps of, and connecting the missing details that she might have forgotten. So what I hope to gain from this project is a collection of stories of my mother's, so then that way it's written and I can go back and retell it to, to future generations.
So my name is Kalia Vu. I use she, her pronouns. And I would say I'm second generation. My parents came here to the United States, so I guess according to Webster's dictionary, I'm second generation. So I was wrapping up my dissertation research. I did my dissertation at The Ohio State University. So I was learning about asset-based pedagogy because it really thinks about how we teach without a deficit lens, especially when we work with marginalized communities, people of color. And so I was thinking about that, but my kind of bread and butter is in museums, so informal learning spaces, and how kind of these traditional learning spaces and theories don't pop up in this space. And so when this fellowship popped up, it was an opportunity for me to think about what I've learned and how I can continue learning it and expanding it in ways that I didn't get a chance to do in my dissertation research. In my project, it's thinking about how people connect with their identity, how they're preserving their own cultures and their own stories. And they're doing it in very different ways. One of the person that I spoke to is really involved in Hmong. And we were just talking about just that history in itself, and I just realized how much I still have to learn. I'm just scratching at the surface of some of those things. And so in this project, it's like, if I go back to like Hmong, I have to think about clothing, I have to think about textiles, I have to think about all of these layers. And this first piece is just these conversations about what is it and what does it mean to people versus like what it is like all the way through what it is today. I think a lot of that is just kind of understanding this process of why they are preserving in their own way. And those stories are for me to share out how they're doing it. We often think of the word culture associated with, you know, very strict, very traditional. You could think of a museum, right? Like it collects, it holds these things that define a culture or a community. Museums are a great place to look at, to see how it's being done. But I also think that if we limit ourselves to one way to do it, we can lose a lot. Culture means so much things beyond what we have defined as culture. And how people today living, especially in the United States, are not just taking in their own culture, but they're also absorbing and living in all these other cultures. And so for me, that was kind of a really eye-opening piece for me to think about it as a second gen, to be like, I am not 100% like, you know, where my parents are at, but I'm also not fully assimilated into the Western world here, but I'm taking both of these cultures together. So I feel like we have to look at it as a evolving kind of process. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to define how we're preserving our heritage, how we're preserving our culture.